You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Hi, I'm Zach Waters, and welcome to another episode of WTF-STOP Photo Talk, where I chat to photographers about their life and connection to the world through photography. I'm really delighted to be talking to my next guest today. He's been a very busy man. Documentary photographer and digital storyteller Daniel Meadows. Born in 1952, he's best known for his 1973 journey around England in the free Photographic Omnibus, where he travelled 10,000 miles in a converted double-decker bus and made just under 1,000 portraits in his free studio session on the streets of 22 British towns and cities. And the phrase "the great ordinary show" was coined by the Daily Mirror, who ran a feature on his travels and his work in the bus. He revisited the project in 1990, photographing some of the subjects of his portraits for his widely published series, National Portraits Now and Then. He's been a lecturer, a student, TV presenter. His books include Living Like This Around Britain in the 70s, Nattering in Paradise, A Word from the Suburbs, the National Portraits Photographs from the 70s, The Bus, the Free Photographic Omnibus. He has work in public collections from the Arts Council England, Martin Parr Foundation, British Library, Side Gallery and the V&A. I managed to track him down and we talked a bit about physics.
Light was measured in foot lumens, and we were plotting the characteristic curves of emulsions.
And then we talked about him being a doctor. Dare I say, Dr. Daniel Meadows.
Yes, doctor, that's nice, isn't it? Yeah, well, at least I'm not an anti-academic.
And then he mentioned his BAFTA. You've won a BAFTA.
Yeah, we got a...
You have a BAFTA?
BAFTA Cymru.
Dr. Meadows, you keep all this stuff really quiet. And his world record attempt with cafe roll books. You hold the world record for cafe roll books, don't you, at the minute?
No, I don't. No, I think Homer Sykes has probably got more than me, but I'm on about 16 or 17, I think.
I'm really delighted you took the time to chat to me, and I caught up with him. I asked him how he was.
Oh, I'm okay. Yeah, I mean, it's weird because I don't take pictures anymore. I was diagnosed with MS about a decade ago, and I can't really keep up anymore. But people still seem, which is nice, to like my pictures, and I haven't been on an aeroplane since 2007. But they're showing some of my suburbia work from the 80s in Germany at the moment, and I thought it would be rude not to go when they invited me. So I went for one night, the Kunsthalle in Darmstadt, near Frankfurt, last Friday.
Did you sample all the delights of German culture?
Well, I was only there for such a short spell, but they were, they're having an existential crisis at the moment because of the war, of course. And and also their COVID rates are still very high. So everyone's masked up and it was quite tense. But but they were very hospitable and generous. And so, it all went off very well.
What did you have on?
Well, there's this wonderful exhibition that's being curated by this German chap called Ralph Goetz, called Facing Britain, which is the largest exhibition ever put together of British documentary photography. And he's been touring it in Germany, and in Darmstadt, where I was, they had a wonderful modernist gallery built in the 1950s after the rebuilding after Allied bombing, and a beautiful gallery, a very big space. And they'd had their most well-attended exhibition ever there, visiting Facing Britain, and it was on through last summer when the COVID restrictions were still in place. So a real tribute to Ralph's work. And so the gallery in Darmstadt, it's got two little side galleries away from the main space, and it decided to keep the photography thing going by putting on two little shows of sort of spin-offs from the Facing Britain show. So there was a Robert Dart show and a Daniel Meadows show. The Daniel Meadows show is basically my suburbia pictures, which I did in the 1980s, mostly in Bromley, South London. Yeah, and the main thrust of the evening was that we did a live interview for their YouTube channel. And the idea was that Ralph and Robert and I would have a three-cornered conversation, but poor old Ralph got COVID. Robert was ill as well, and I was the last man standing. So anyway, it went off all right. Yeah.
Sign of the times. Was it just photographs? It wasn't sound and photography as well?
It was photographs on their own. Yeah.
Just photographs. I do share your vision with audio, I really do. It's been a real inspiration to me and the way I've taken on sound, and I've been experimenting with it for a while. You say you were diagnosed with MS. When was that, 2013?
Well, it takes them about 2 years to decide that you've got it. And obviously I'd been ill for quite some time before that, on and off. And so I always put it down in 2012, but actually 2013 was when I got the final diagnosis, yeah.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
You've shot since then. You did the West Bromwich Sandwell project, didn't you?
I did a project but that was great. They were wonderful. They were really helpful. But I realised that I think that was the last one really. I haven't got the energy, and also my hand-eye coordination is rubbish, and I drop things all the time. And it's not really. You have to. I find doing documentary work, you have to give a lot of yourself for a very long time, and involves an incredible amount of energy, and I don't have that anymore.
It's very consuming doing documentary work. I'd love to sort of go through how it all started, just even before university. What brought you to Manchester Poly? Where did you get your calling to be a photographer?
My calling, it's a good one, that really. I think my upbringing was fairly extraordinary. Well, when I look back, I suppose everybody thinks their childhood is extraordinary, but mine, it was extraordinary in that it takes some explaining, in that it's unfamiliar territory to most people. My father was the resident agent on a country estate in Gloucestershire. The resident agent is somebody who lives on the land owned by, in this case, a peer of the realm, a man called Sir Bolton Ayres Munsell, who became Lord Munsell. He was a Tory politician and a landowner, and he was Chief Whip and rose to be First Lord of the Admiralty in the 30s. So quite a player. The resident agent's job is to run the country estate and to run it. And the country estate exists. This wasn't old money. These weren't dukes and earls. This family was living on money made in the north of England in the mid-Victorian period, in Leeds, in fact, wool manufacturing. And they'd made a huge fortune and decided to spend it on country living in the south of England, living in a big country house with servants and an estate and tenant farmers, and all for their pleasure, really. Everything existed for their pleasure. And my father was there as a young man, very young man. He was only 22 or 3 when he began working for them, running everything. And then the war came, and it was all over, really, for them. That way of living, they were taxed out of it. The family broke up anyway. His lordship took up with a young woman who was the same age as his daughters, and left, leaving her ladyship behind. But my dad often talked about those times before the war, and he loved that order of things, that pyramid of his lordship at the top, and then the all the various ranks of kind of feudal living, right down to the farm workers and even the pensioners they employed to tie bundles of sticks and dry them in the basement of the hall, which were then used in the different rooms to light fires. And I was born in 1952, and my dad only had that job. He was agent for that estate right up until it was finally broken up in it was falling to pieces throughout my childhood. But the values of that very, very class-ridden thing were something that I think he really did respect that.
Yeah.
And I found it quite difficult, so even as a child, when I'd be out on my bike or walking, in a country lane, and and somebody would stick his head up out of a ditch where he was, cutting a hedge or something, and he'd say, "Good morning, sir," or "Good morning, Mr. Daniel." And this would be a venerable chap who, in his 50s or 60s, and I used to find that quite hard, quite odd and strange, particularly since, we had the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and, things had moved on a bit. And they wanted to raise me as though I would I would become a gentleman. And, I was sent off to boarding school when I was 8 years old. So, I was very quickly exposed to a whole lot of other values because I was sent to it wasn't a sort of posh feeder school for one of the smart public schools. It was just, a fairly average boarding school run by Quakers mostly. From the age of 8, I was on my own. I felt I was on my own really, and I was raised almost like it was sort of kind of monastic until I was 18, being in an all boys school full of privilege and all of that. But in fact, it was very unprivileged in that the education itself wasn't particularly good. I didn't thrive very well in it. And, there were no girls, there were no people of colour, there were nobody working class. I mean, it was a very, very weird world where a lot of my training, I realised in my teenage years, was to try and get me to be a missionary. I mean, it was very, very odd. And the more I look back on it, the stranger it seems. And you had to fail at everything before you could do art. And I was pretty good at failing, I think. And so by the time I was, I think, 17, I was allowed to do art A-level in 1 year. And as part of that, we went on a school trip to London to look at exhibitions. And I went to, in my school suit, aged 18, I think. I would have been 18 in the summer of 1970. I went to the Bill Brandt exhibition at the Hayward Gallery, and if you're looking for a Damascene moment, that was it for me. He was a bit of a toff. I mean, he was German, which must have helped a little bit because he had that sort of slight, Bill Brandt being that slight difference. Yeah. But I think he probably had many of the mannerisms of a upper class English gent. Yeah. And yet here he was using his camera to slip between the social classes, and so you had the rich man in his Belgravia house with the servants laying the table, but you also had the maid warming the bathwater, and then outside of the home, he was traveling around Britain photographing miners, going down in cages and all the things we know that Bill Brandt photographed. Yeah. And for me, that was an incredible eye-opener, these documentary pictures from the 1930s. And I didn't, up to that point, I hadn't had a clue what I wanted to do. And then I just came out of that exhibition saying, that's what I want to do. And I applied to 3, I think, art colleges, London, Poly, maybe Derby and Manchester. And the only one that would have me was Manchester. And it was wonderfully lucky getting to Manchester because being in the north of England, it was a whole new territory for me, which was fantastic. And my fellow students were, turned out to be some of the best photographers in Britain in the, of my generation. So, Brian Griffin and Pete Fraser and Martin Parr were all contemporaries. And I realised how incredibly lucky I was to be in such good company.
It's amazing hindsight, isn't it? Looking back, you just met like-minded people, I guess. You were very lucky. Who was your tutors then at Manchester?
Well, Jack Tate was the head of school. And then it was a strange place in that it was its first year as a polytechnic. Up to that point, it had been a number of city colleges, teacher training, the art school, obviously, and there was a science element to it, a technical college, and they were all pulled together as the poly. And so they were trying to work out, is photography art? Is it science? And so we had some art teachers, a very lovely man called John Fisher, who I remember was very supportive, and Alan Murgatroyd, the filmmaker. But then we also had scientists. Dr. George Wakefield, who had a column in Amateur Photographer, and he taught the science of photography. I never understood a word, and he talked to us all about everything was light was measured in foot lumens, and we were plotting the characteristic curves of emulsions. and making our own cameras with pinhole cameras, and calculating the size of the hole, and then buying a needle that was the right the right size to puncture the little piece of tinfoil to give you the perfect depth of field for the size of the camera you'd made. And and then when you plotted your characteristic curve on a densitometer, if it wasn't 45 degrees, you had to go back and start all over again. And, so you had this weird mixture of science and technology and art, and it was in the early days of higher education in photography. And we were, we were given a lot of freedom, but it was also very odd.
When you say freedom, what was the curriculum based there? What were they asking you to shoot?
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Well, they would give you projects which you could then interpret. So, I mean, for instance, in my second year, I was living in Moss Side, which was being massively redeveloped. There was a lot of inner city, regeneration went on in the 70s. And Moss Side was a place that was where a lot of students lived because houses were being demolished, and so the ones who were willing to squat could squat, but even the ones who were willing to pay rent, it was cheap because most of the places that you were going to live in weren't going to be there the following year. It was also full of, it had been a big Irish community, but there was a huge new immigrant population of a lot of West Indians, people of African Caribbean origin. There were a lot of South Asians as well, people from India and Pakistan, and Polish. And it was a vibrant community that was being broken up. And I can't remember what brief I'd been given, but I mean, I started renting a little shop in, we got our fees paid then, tuition fees were paid, and you had your family were means tested, and then you were given a supplement for your living, maintenance grant.
Yeah.
And so I found I could, by going carefully, I could rent a little studio, which was former barber's shop. And I rented this little studio. And
was that Graham Street?
Yeah, the shop I called it the shop on Graham
What
Street.
made you do that out of interest? You had a studio at uni, did you?
Yeah, there was obviously one at the uni, but I wanted to be out in the community.
Right.
I was never going to be a fashion or advertising photographer. And most of the teaching was steered towards people becoming commercial photographers.
Yeah.
And I knew that I only wanted to make pictures like Bill Brandt. That was what really got me excited. And but I knew I didn't have the sort of journalistic skills to decide who to photograph in a community that's breaking up, or how you would do that. And it occurred to me that I saw John Fisher, one of my tutors, showed me Worlds in a Small Room, the Irving Penn project. And I thought, wow, I could do a little small room. And so the idea was that people would come to me, they'd just be walking down the street and they'd see free photographs, and you have your picture taken for free. They would come into the shop and people would, ask me questions, and just sit down and we'd natter and have a cup of tea. And I'd start making pictures, and a lot of them to begin with weren't very good, but I got better at it, and I also loved the whole conversational aspect. I mean, that was where I made my first audio recordings as well, was in that little shop. And I only ran it for, I don't know, but not even a whole term, probably 8 or 9 weeks or something, and then only on Saturday mornings. And then there was a whole thing about distributing the pictures, making certain that people got their photographs, and then but then people would know, and then they'd prepare for that next Saturday morning. They'd get dressed and get the right groupings of people together and come and have their pictures taken. And that was just a brilliant way of getting to know people. And
it's amazing. It's like a naivety, isn't it? You're just going straight out there, following your instincts. How do I get out there? What am I going to do? It's amazing. You said they're not very good. It's part of your past, and without that, you wouldn't have gone on to do other things in the whole process, because the community side's been the real core of your personal work, hasn't it, for all your life?
Yeah, it has. Yeah, it was all of my work really. But
Sure.
So obviously then, the way it moved on was that I liked that way of working, and so I thought if I could put the shop on wheels and go out into communities, that might be an interesting experiment. And so I spent most of my last year at college, well, we'd call it crowdfunding nowadays, but then it was just kind of looking for sponsors. I used to go up to the Central Reference Library, where Engels had researched the condition of the working class. I'd pull directories off shelves and write 10 letters. I had this discipline of writing 10 letters a day to anybody who I thought might give me the money.
I'm from the generation of writing letters. My last book, the football book, I spent all New Year's Eve, all the week in Christmas, writing letters in the 90s to get people's attention, and that's how it was,
Yeah.
The work on Graham Street was black and white. What camera kit were you using? What was your sort of go-to kit?
I bought a Pentax Spotmatic.
Yeah.
I had 2 lenses, a 50mm and a 28, I think. Yeah, 50 and a 28. And it was a tiny studio, and I needed the wide-angle lens to fit people in. So and I borrowed a light from the college, a big photo flood. I mean, those pictures look like they're shot with flash, but actually it was just one big photo flood light. And then the backdrop was stuff that I took out of the fashion studio. At the end of a week or whatever, in the fashion studio, they had all this crumpled up Colorama sheets, and I just used to bundle them up and take them down to the shop and smooth them out and stick them together with sellotape, and that was my backdrop.
You were obviously using Kodak Tri-X, I presume.
Actually, I used Tri-X a lot, and it would be my standard film. But in the shop, I used Ilford FP4, and I'm glad I did, because when I came to scan those, the negatives were in terrible order. They, because I went through experiments of teaching some of the kids, in Moss Side how to develop film, and I set up a dark room in the shop one weekend, and of course the negs were, I don't know, but they were pretty in terrible order. But the actual fine grain was good, and so when it came to scanning them in the when the digital era arrived, I managed to make some pretty good scans out of those images and print them better than they'd ever been printed at the time when I shot them.
That FP4 must have been very slow 100 then, was it? It must have had...
It was 125 ASA. Yeah, was it? Yeah, I think so. Or was that anyway, yeah. It was 125 ASA Ilford. If that was FP4, it was FP4. Yeah.
There's a really nice story about one of the chaps you photographed on Graham Street, Neville Davis.
Yeah.
He got in touch with you when you were working on the Sandwell project, is that right?
Yes. Well, what's been nice about that project is that, I don't know, sometime in the noughties, I suppose, I put all those pictures on my website. And then what's been nice is that every now and again I get contacted by someone, so who says, "Oh, I recognise myself," or whatever. So there are several people who I've revisited. And Neville was one. Neville and his sister. Yeah, and I did make a little film with him in what was that, 2012 or something?
14,
like that.
maybe.
14 was it? Maybe, yeah. You're on it. And I stayed in touch with him, and he in fact came. I mean, what's lovely about documentary is that it doesn't leave you alone.
No.
Like you do something, and then years later somebody says, "Oh, that's my dad," or "That's my cousin," or "That's my," and I had the lovely things happen after I made that little film with Neville, which people can link to on my Photobus website. I got an email from his son, his grown-up son, saying, "Thank you so much for giving me my history." Like, he didn't know lots of the things that Neville had talked to me about when I made the little film with him. And, in the way that sons don't know a lot of things about their dads. But this idea that I've given him his history is lovely. I mean, I think that's, it's, warms the cockles, doesn't it?
Yeah, it must be the icing on the cake for you in a way.
Yeah, it's, I mean, I have gone out of my way in my career to revisit people that I photographed, in random, the initial contact with a lot of the people I photographed was random, because they either came into my shop, or then when I finally got the free Photographic Omnibus together and set off after I left college, in my shop on wheels, as it were, in my converted double-decker bus. Obviously, the whole point of everything was to have random encounters with strangers, and but then in the 90s, I deliberately went out of my way to revisit people 25 years later, and catch up on what had been happening in their lives.
It's amazing. It's really rewarding when stuff like that happens. In my last 2 books, I've had exactly the same. People coming saying, "Oh, my dad died and that's him in the picture. Can you give us a picture?" And you just give them a picture, don't you? You just know, please take one.
Yeah.
You've shot black and white all the way through your career, but going back to 1972, saw you and Mr. Parr go to Butlins, and finally you shot colour, which I have to say is absolutely wonderful work. Tell me about a little bit of insight into Butlins.
Yeah. Well, Martin and I were students at the time, and we just, the end of the second year, we needed to make some money in the summer holidays, and we thought if we took the job of working as walkie photographers at Butlins, then we'd earn some money, and we also might be able to do a project of our own about, life in Butlins.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
And we talked to Andy Sproxton and Val Williams, who were thinking of setting up a gallery in York. And they said, if you go and shoot something and we like it, we'll exhibit it. So that was all the kind of encouragement we needed. We did shoot a big body of work between us in black and white, which we edited with Andy and Val, and they put it on as the opening show at Impressions Gallery when it was in the Shambles in York, a little upstairs gallery, which opened in November 1973. And whenever Val and dear old Andy died, sadly, in 78, I think. But obviously Val Williams and Martin and I, get together from time to time, and we always talk about it as being a black and white show. But when Val came to research my archive for the retrospective show she put together in 2011, that was a touring show that started at the National Media Museum in Bradford in 2011. There was this box with Butlins written on it, and when we got down to the bottom of the box, there were all these transparencies just kind of lying naked in the dust at the bottom, and she said, no, I don't remember any of this. This isn't, no, I don't know what this is. And anyway, I found a photograph of me and Martin standing in the gallery the night it opened. And we're standing in front of this fireplace, and above the fireplace are this little montage of 2 or 3 panels, each with four pictures montaged together, like a photo album. And obviously we identified these images, and they were color pictures. So we all had to rethink how the exhibition was, and so I then began scanning these dirty trannies and making them nice. And why did I shoot color? Let me tell you, I always wanted to shoot color. I think at Butlins it was quite easy. There was lots of color film around. Although you did half the work in black and white, you also did half the work in color at Butlins. So there was film around, and there was I suppose I buy my own color film, but I mean there was a lot of people were working in color, and then you could see that it was relatively easy to process, and it wasn't that slow. I think Ektachrome was 125 ASA or something.
Yeah.
And so, I always wanted to work in colour. But I mean, the problem that I had working in the community was that you wanted to be able to give people pictures, and colour was a problem because you shot transparency. Well, colour neg at that time was pretty rubbish, I have to say. Yeah. Until the 1980s, colour negative wasn't really something that you could.
That's right.
So you'd shoot colour transparency to get the better quality. But to make a print from colour transparency was just ridiculously expensive. I mean, way beyond what I could afford. So I always wanted to work in colour, and I loved the freedom of shooting colour. In fact, I'm Craig Atkinson at Cafe Royal Books is, I think it's next week or the week after, he's doing an edition of my Butlins colour pictures, which is really lovely to see them again. Yeah.
I was going to say, you hold the world record for Cafe Royal Books, don't you, at the minute?
No, I don't. No, I think Homer Sykes has probably got more than me, but I'm on about 16 or 17, I think.
16 or 17. If you bring in the colour work out, you have 18.
No, I think with the colour one, it's 17. Yeah, and then
Oh, you have within the books, you've got the audio tape CDs as well.
Yeah. There's one audio CD. No, it's a DVD. In fact, it's a DVD, but it has a lot of the audio in it. Yeah.
For the sake of your competition with Homer, we can call it 17 before Butlins. So that will be 18 books. That's amazing.
Yeah. No, it's lovely. Yeah, I really love CRB. I think
I can see Homer scanning his negs now as he listens to this. I'll get another book out of it.
Yeah.
So you were just basically trying to canvas images to the punters, basically, in Butlins, weren't you?
Yeah. No, it was a commercial thing, and it's all set up, for you, and they tell you what to do, and you're given a book which has some. It's like a checkbook, which has a piece of paper you tear out of it, which has which you give to the customer. When you take that picture, and then there's a stub, and you keep the stubs, and then you hand the stub in with your roll of film, and that's processed in the lab, and then the stubs match the bits of paper when the people come into the shop to look at their pictures and decide whether they want to buy it or not. And so you wander around all day taking pictures, and then you have formal things like lunch times where you have to shoot. I mean, it's amazing. You have to shoot, I don't know, 80 portraits while people are eating their lunch. And you shoot on a half-frame camera for an Olympus pen camera for making transparency for a keyring fob.
Oh my God!
That was the gimmick then. But I mean, all of these things were basically, it was all formatted for you. You just did what you were told, and you had to earn. You obviously on commission. If you earned less than 30 quid a week, 2 weeks running, they put you in the dark room.
The question is, did you make any money?
Well, I did manage to stay out of the dark room, and I did manage to raise enough money to make a sort of publicity leaflet for the free photographic omnibus project that I wanted to do when I left college. Yes, so.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Yeah. So it was...
Manchester Poly couldn't have been doing everything wrong.
No.
For that cauldron of, I don't know what the word is, eclectic or whatever, holistic approach. Is that the right word to the education?
Yeah, I mean, yes.
You've got yourself, Brian Griffin, Martin Parr come out of that. It must have been doing something right with the coming together with you guys.
Yeah. I mean, I think we had a lot of freedom. I mean, one of the other projects that Martin and I did together was the June Street project, where we photographed everybody who lived in a street, a classic northern street, with cobbled street. Not cobbles, they call them stone sets, don't they? Whatever it was, 8 houses either side of the little street, and classic. It was a street that had been used by Coronation Street, the TV soap. For filming some exteriors, and it was about to be demolished, and that's another CRB book that comes out this week. Actually, Martin and I and Craig have got together because Craig's doing this big exhibition at the Parr Foundation of his first 500 books, and.
Well, just all your books then, is it?
And the one that where obviously Martin was quite keen to do something of his to celebrate, because the show's happening at his foundation.
Yeah.
So we decided to do the June Street pictures as a CRB publication.
Oh, okay.
So, so that's coming out. That's come out this week. Yeah.
Is this never been seen before? Because I don't recall them at all.
No, those pictures have been in. They've been seen quite a lot. They're in certainly in two of my books. They're in two or three of Martin's. But this is just them on their own, the complete set on their own. And they've been. I mean, they seem to be being exhibited somewhere all the time. But at the moment, they're on in the Whitworth Art Gallery in Manchester, where they're doing an exhibition about wallpaper. Because the Whitworth has the best collection of 20th century wallpaper in its museum, and they decided to do an exhibition celebrating all these wallpapers, and they used a document. They wanted Martin and my documentation of June Street rather, because there's a lot of wallpaper in those photographs.
Lots of wallpaper, yes, that had to be the connection there. The Photographic Omnibus, where did that come from, that name? As I told you, I had quite a posh upbringing, and I knew Latin, and omnibus means for all, or for all the people. And so I like the idea, the sort of democratic sounding photographic project called the Free Photographic for All the People, the Free Photographic Omnibus. I mean, there were lots of buses around in the 70s. Obviously in the 60s, Ken Kesey had driven across America, encouraging people to take various mind-altering drugs with his gang, the Merry Pranksters. Cliff Richard in Britain had done Summer Holiday, where he and his gang of mates from a London bus depot take one of the buses and convert it and drive across Europe with Eunice Stubbs. They've just gone out to pull women.
Yeah, yes. Well, maybe they have. Yeah. But then there were other buses. The Beatles had Magical Mystery Tour, which was a bus, of course. Yeah. So I don't think the bus was a particularly original idea, and but the idea of having a sort of portable documentary space where people could come and talk to me about anything, and where I could photograph them. And then also, I did these portraits in. I think I went to 22 different towns and cities around the UK. I got an Arts Council grant at the time as well, which helped, and I had some money from regional arts associations. So, I mean, it was always operating on a shoestring, and the bus was always infuriatingly letting me down. But the fact is, I did all those portraits, but also the point was to be able to listen to people.
Yeah.
And so I did quite a few audio recordings, and also to for people to tell me of things that they were doing that I could go and photograph.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's the Living Like This, the book that was published in 1975, the contemporaneous book, includes, pictures of strike meetings and greyhound racing and all sorts of things, that, in addition to some of the portraits.
Yeah, I've got that somewhere. It's got the two girls on the cover, isn't it?
Yeah, Lynn and Stella, yeah. I'm still in touch with Lynn and Stella. I had they live on the south coast, and they're still fun people. And I took my grandchildren for a day on the beach in Stella. Stella has a beach hut in Hayling Island, and we had a lovely day on the beach with one of my sons and my grandchildren. Yeah, last summer. So I still
It's amazing. It's amazing, that connection. So the photographic bus was your bus. You went on tour with two different towns to just engage and visualize people and talk and find out about them. Your curiosity. You always say you were curious about things. The bus. It looks like something out of Heartbeat. So tell me, how did you get the bus? I want to know about the bus.
Okay, well, the bus was a Leyland Titan PD1 with Dupel. It was 1948 or 7 or 8, yeah.
Really, that late?
So yes, it was. It had just been taken out of service. It had Dupel coachwork. And it was a low bridge decker. It was a wooden frame with aluminium over it.
Yeah.
Very cool immediate post-war design with air doors that kind of went.
Oh, yeah.
It had just been taken out of service. It had been working for Barton Transport commissioned and then worked its life out for Barton Transport at Chilwell in Nottingham, running in the weeks. It was everything from a school bus to a parcels carriage, regular service bus, running routes around the Midlands. But it was also a coach built, so it would take day trippers to Skegness and places like that during the summer in the holidays. It was a lovely thing, except that it did keep breaking down, and I was no kind of a mechanic. But I did repurpose it. I think converting would be too make it sound like I knew what I was doing. I mean, I kind of repurposed it. As I had built a dark room in upstairs. I had a bedroom upstairs. I had a very nice front bench upstairs, immediately above the driver's cab. And so you could pick up a few hitchhikers, and they'd be...
Well, I was going to say, I bet for just a bit of fun you would pick people up.
Yeah. And there was a bell they could ring, which rang immediately behind my ear, which is very loud.
Did you have one of them little money things which the conductors had? When...
No, I never did it because I just opened the doors and take people on, driving down the motorway. And if somebody wanted to get off at the next junction, I just told them to ring the bell or stamp their foot, and then I'd pull off. Yeah.
That is unbelievable. You were driving it, I presume. You'd obviously had to go and get an HGV license.
Yes, yeah, I had to do an HGV driver's test.
Did you know anything about bus technology at the time then?
No, nothing at all. No, absolutely nothing. That was part of why it kept breaking down.
In the morning, you woke up and went, "Martin, I'm going to buy a bus." That's amazing.
Something like that, yeah.
And that's how the greatest things happen, isn't it? Just on a heartbeat.
Yeah, that's right. And I managed to. The thing is, I did manage to fund it. I managed to get sponsors together, and also I got quite good at getting publicity. So it got covered by radio and TV, but also a very nice piece in the Sunday Times and a wonderful piece in the Daily Mirror, which I've always treasured. Yeah.
It must have cost quite a bit to run it, did it? Like diesel.
Yeah. And also it was 1974. It was the 73-4 was the winter of discontent. Well, it was the earlier of the two in the 70s. It was the earlier winter. I mean, it was. There were fuel shortages and there were sugar shortages, and I remember pulling up at a filling station, and I thought there was no fuel gauge on it. You just had to stick something into the fuel tank and like a long piece of grass, and if it came out with a wet end, you still had some fuel. And I couldn't see that there was any fuel in the bus, and so I remember a man sold me a watering can full of diesel to get me off his forecourt.
No way.
Yeah. No, it was a bad time, and it's like it was an interesting time to be doing that project.
I mean, you could have picked up people and charged them fares for it just for laugh. You could have kept it sort of self-financing anyway. I mean, and not having a fuel gauge. Oh my God.
But I had such difficulty getting insurance though, and I would never have got insurance to turn it into a PSV vehicle. Yeah.
So you revisited this project on your Now and Then exhibition.
Yeah, well, I did. Well, what happened was in the 1990s, Val Williams got interested in the bus portraits and decided to exhibit them. And she did a little touring show in 1997, which started in Manchester and then went to Derby and then went to the National Media Museum, which was just some of the portraits. Yeah. And it kind of captured people's imagination, and she wrote about them that it didn't really matter who the individuals were because they were representative of types. And I always hate the idea of treating people as types, because I'm much more interested in people's individuality. And so I was kind of spurred by that to prove to her that the wonders of individuality triumph over the sort of typology that she wanted to create. And
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
I was then working in the journalism school at Cardiff University, and we had very good connections with local newspapers because at that time, to become a journalist, you had to have done at least 2 years working on a regional newspaper. So we were training up graduates to be journalists, and then they were going off to work on, the Hartlepool Examiner or whatever, or the local newspapers. And so I started approaching local newspaper editors in towns where I'd had a good run with the bus, made some nice pictures, when it hadn't rained and where people had turned up and where, I had a little body of work against the same sort of background. So the 3 places I chose were Barrow-in-Furness, Hartlepool and Southampton. Working with local newspaper editors who then made features of these old pictures and asked people, this is before the internet obviously, asked readers if they recognized themselves or anybody else, and to gave them a phone number to ring, and then I would go to the town and follow up the leads and re-photograph people. And it was a wonderful time because I just loved meeting people again and hearing their stories, in between being a lot of the people I photographed were, not all, but a lot were late teenagers or young marrieds. And obviously, those 20 years or 25 years had seen what had happened to them, their ambitions fulfilled or not, as the case may be, or all the things that had happened in their lives. And of course, I hope I was able to prove to Val that every individual story is, everyone has a story to tell, and it's a gem.
I'm pretty impressed how you found people. It's quite an achievement and rewarding as well. When I think of Daniel Meadows, I often come back to the bus, and I think your name resonates with these bus images. And you've been busy, man. You've done a lot.
Yeah,
you have done a lot. I mean, your CV's funny because you've got like a page with a few paragraphs on, but your real CV, I mean, because you own Cafe Royal Books,
don't own Cafe Royal.
You can see, you can see a lot of what you've done and the diversity of your work. But you were jobbing photographer, you were PR photographer as well, weren't you?
Yeah, well, after the bus, I took a 2-year residency. I was a photographer in residence to the borough of Pendle in Lancashire. So I did a lot of stuff about disappearing trades around the textile industry. That seemed to me to be the thing that got me attracted.
Would that have been pig killing, was it?
Well, I began with industrial weaving, and then I found a mill that was powered still by steam. I mean, it felt like it was like something out of Dickens. And then I was interested in the men who cleaned the boiler flues, and then the steeplejacks who laddered the chimneys. And there was a farmer who used to come to the mill. The mill became a sort of like a place that I was very close to, and Stanley Graham, the engineer there, was incredibly helpful in introducing me to people. And farmer used to come poking around called Cyril, looking for what he called pigging sticks, but they were actually broken picking sticks from the looms. They were made of hornbeam or something. They're very strong, and he liked them because he liked to use them in the process of when he's salting his bacon. and rolling his flitches, pig flitches. And so he invited me to photograph him killing pigs. And that was, so there was several of the CRB books deal with that period, the steeplejack, the pig killing, the flue cleaning, the running the steam engine and so on. Yeah.
Pig killing's Cafe Royal, isn't it?
Yep. Cafe Royal, there are Cafe Royal books on all of those subjects.
Yeah. I'm very intrigued by Factory Records stuff you did.
Yeah, well, then what happened was that I stayed on in Lancashire because the mill that I was photographing was then closed down and was going to be demolished, and I wanted to be around for that. Also, I kind of liked the town and the people there, and but I didn't have a direct way of earning a living. So I began freelancing for newspapers and magazines. I did a lot of work around that time for New Society. I became a sort of stringer for the Observer newspaper. And then I did a big story for the Observer magazine, which was a story of my own making, which was about long-term schizophrenic patients in a psychiatric hospital in North Manchester, Prestwich Hospital.
Clayton Ward.
That's another CRB book. And I'd always been interested in working at Granada TV. I always thought I could make a living from being a researcher, even if if I wasn't going to be a program maker. I always enjoyed the idea of researching things because I was out researching stuff anyway for my photography. And after the Clayton Ward thing, my application popped to the top of the pile because World in Action had been trying to do the same story, and I'd kind of scooped them. I'd beaten them to it for the Observer, and so they hauled me in to kind of interrogate me about it, and then they offered me a job in regional programming as a researcher, which I did on and off for 2 years. And for a lot of that time, or for some of that time anyway, I shared a large open plan office with 30 or more people, but one of them was Tony Wilson, who was then setting up Factory Records. And so he knew I was a photographer and not just a researcher, and so he used to get me to come and photograph things that were going on with him. And so I did photograph Durruti Column and Joy Division and A Certain Ratio.
24-hour party people.
Yeah, so
you must look back at that and go, wow, what was I part of then?
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, I do really. But at the time it seemed more, matter of fact, more prosaic. But I liked Tony, and I just enjoyed his company. And Granada TV was fine. I learned a lot there, but I was never going to make my career in television. I did present several editions of an evening arts review program. Made a few little films, including a film with Chris Killett. In fact, when Chris Killett did his Isle of Man book, I did a 15-minute film interviewing him, talking about his work and what he wanted to do. And that was the beginning of quite a friendship. He died last year, and
sadly.
But right up to the end we were exchanging emails and books and stuff. And
that's good. How did you find interviewing another photographer?
Interviewing another. Well, I wasn't very good. I'm sort of embarrassed looking at it now, but I was very young. What's nice about it is that Killip articulates his philosophy of how he approached his documentary practice so well. And when I went to hear him talk at the Parr Foundation, a couple of years before he died, he was he was almost using the same phraseology as he'd been using 40 years before. And he was a guy who'd really worked out what he was trying to do and was able to explain it clearly.
Oh, he so did. I listened to him discuss and break down the Skinning Grove composition.
Yes.
Oh, it's mind-blowing listening to it.
Yeah.
It's one of the greatest pieces of photography education I've ever had.
Yeah.
And looking at, but your proof's in the pudding, isn't it? It's just looking at the work and listening to what he said.
No, well, I mean, I've been very lucky in that two people that I really admire are also people I really know. So Martin Parr has this incredible, he had it as a boy. I mean, we were 18 when we first started knocking around together. He had this incredible ability to see right across the frame, peak of the action, two or three things all going on at the same time, and to be able to, freeze them at the right moment. An incredible talent. And Chris Killip had this, I was just lucky that I was able to, have parallel careers with these guys.
Brian Griffin wasn't too bad either.
Brian's great. I mean, why do I laugh? I laugh because Brian's always good company, and I always have a good. Martin Parr's very competitive. Chris Killip was pretty serious and quite confrontational at times. Whereas Brian is always, I always have a laugh with Brian, And I spent a little time with him just recently, and he's still dear Brian. He's a lovely man.
Good for a night out.
Yes.
Throughout this jobbing photographer, PR man, TV presenter, you were researcher. You were studying for your PhD?
No, not at that stage. I didn't start working on my PhD until I was in my 40s.
But you were definitely a lecturer then?
Yeah, no, well, my adventure in the north of England came to an end when David Hearn invited me to come down to Newport in South Wales and to teach on his documentary photography course there, which I began doing in...
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
The very end of 1982 as a part-timer, and then in 83 I became a full-timer there. And I taught that course for 10 years, and then I moved to the Centre for Journalism Studies at Cardiff University, which was a Russell Group university, whereas Newport was a local authority regional art college. So it was a big kind of step up into the world of academe, although we were teaching a one-year postgrad practical course to young journalists. But I quickly began to realize that the digital revolution was going to be something that was going to be exciting for me, because my biggest problem in reaching an audience with my work up to that point was that I had still photographs and I had audio. And to match the two together required, large sums of money plus an industrial scale equipment.
That's what I was thinking about the bus, because I was imagining this big reel-to-reel tape deck you must have had on the bus.
I did some of the time have a Ewer on the bus, and the rest of the time I had a little sort of dictaphone type tape recorder. But I was never able to put the pictures and the words together, not until the digital age. And when the digital age came, I was quick to, I think I was, an early adopter of digital tools. And I went, being Russell Group University, they could get access to funds, and they sent me to America to do some research. And I'm very glad they did in the end of the 90s. And and I came across all kinds of people doing all kinds of interesting things, a lot of it in California. Particularly a man called Dana Winslow, actually the third, who'd lived a life pretty much like mine, photographically in America. He'd worked for cable TV quite a lot, probably shot a lot more video than I ever had. And he was starting to put together audio and still pictures and little bits of video in a desktop computer, which nowadays you can do in a mobile phone. But at that time, the idea that it could be done on a desktop computer was, something that was, completely new. And I came back from America, and with Ian Hargreaves, who was my boss at the university, we pitched to the BBC in Cardiff that I could run a community storytelling project, which is like the bus on speed. We'd have a lab of computers, and we'd take it into village halls and miners' institutes and miners' libraries, the community halls around Wales, and teach people how to make their own 2 minutes of TV. And the BBC embraced it and did it, and it lasted for 6 or 7 years. And we made a lot of 2-minute films, and we had our own website, and people starting to realize that they could be producers and not just consumers of media. I know that that's a very common idea now, but it wasn't in 2001 when I was getting this together. And it was very successful. I mean, we won a BAFTA for that work. A Welsh.
Wow. You've won a BAFTA?
Yeah, we got
You have a BAFTA?
BAFTA Cymru.
Dr. Meadows, you keep all this stuff really quiet.
Yeah, but one of the ways in which I could really interrogate this project, that not just do the work with the community and with the team the BBC built around my idea.
Yeah.
Was that I could interrogate it intellectually by doing it as a PhD as well. So in parallel to doing the practical thing on the ground, I also did a PhD at that time. And I think I finally got it in something like 2005. So I was 53 or something. So yeah.
Studies on digital storytelling, wasn't it?
Yes, it was about digital storytelling and photography, and it was also about the project was called BBC Capture Wales. Sadly, you can't see, the Beeb had a website, but it's all gone now. But the films themselves, we managed to archive over 600, nearly 700 of them at high res, and they're all in the National Library of Wales in Aberystwyth. So, hopefully, in some years to come, people will come across them and go, "Hey, wow, that was an interesting thing to be doing."
So you said earlier, with the onset of MS, you started to really sort of look at your archive and put the sound. I noticed you've got a lot of stuff on Vimeo where you...
Yeah. Well, yes, exactly. I mean, when I decided that I wasn't going to be able to get out and take pictures anymore, I used a lot of the time to do two things. One was to catalogue my archive.
Yeah.
But in the process of doing that cataloguing, I was turning up audio tapes, and at last I had the time to listen to them. I mean, there were days in the early days of having MS when I didn't really do very much all day. I'd lie in bed, but I'd have a tape recorder, and I'd play these old tapes, and then they'd break up, and I'd find myself getting out of bed and getting the little screwdrivers out and taking those little cassettes to pieces and sticking them together with sellotape, and then
we've all done that, yeah.
And I gradually transcribing these onto copying them, making digital files out of them, and and so I began to, use the things that I'd been teaching other people while I was on the road with the BBC. I began using a lot of those skills in making new little films about my own archive. And these are all available on there's 40 odd of them on Vimeo. Yeah.
They are, yeah, they're fascinating, actually. I really do share your fascination with audio. I really do, and with the bus and the way you've sort of gone about stuff. It really did inspire me years ago. When you were a lecturer and you were teaching in the university, what was the sort of curriculum base you were writing?
Okay, well, obviously at Newport, I was in the art school, and I was teaching David Hearn's 2-year BTEC in documentary photography. Yeah. When I went to Cardiff, it was originally just teaching postgrads, training them as journalists, and so I was teaching them, the ones who wanted to learn about photography. The digital age was coming at us, very quickly at that time, and so I became the sort of school's bellwether with that. And as I say, I was given research money to go to America and do some research, and And I came back and started teaching. I just taught modules on other people's courses. So I teach modules called, I don't know, some of them were just about photographic appreciation, but then others of them were about storytelling, or community storytelling, or working with strangers, getting students, out of the library and out into the streets with audio recorders and making work with people out there, us. And so I had quite a lot of different. I taught I taught at all levels, from undergraduate through postgraduate to PhD students. Working with multimedia, and trying just to address the onrush of the coming of the digital age. It's nowadays everybody, because we all have a smartphone that can mix audio and video and publish it all in something that you carry around in your pocket. That was not possible in the year 2000, or even in the.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. And so, it needed people to be experimenters and researchers and work out things that could be done. And so I spent a lot of time researching and then immediately teaching the things that I was learning, and challenging the students to be the ones who are going to be the next generation inventing the new tools of media production.
It's amazing being a lecturer, how much you actually learn about yourself and about everything else. It really does help you to keep in tune with what's going on.
I've never had a better student experience than when I'm being a lecturer.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yes.
Your archive, part of it or all of it's at Oxford University. It was at Birmingham Libraries before. Is it all scanned?
Well, all would be I mean, obviously there's many rolls of film and many fewer, but still quite a lot of audio recordings.
Yeah. What
I did was I decided that I would scan 500 images. Yeah. So I basically there is a something called the Bodleian 500, which is 500 top res scans and a guide print to go with each one. But that isn't the main archive. The main archive is the all the correspondence, the letters, the negatives, the raw tapes, the work prints from the BAFTA, some exhibition prints from now and then, posters and journals and diaries, and and of course all of this stuff is now properly catalogued and put into the Bodleian Library in Oxford. And that's to me that was just like a massive relief. In 2019 they did it. We did it sort of 6 months before the pandemic broke, thank God. And and they gave me a really lovely exhibition there, and they published a new book, which is still in print and people can buy, which is a kind of overview of my career. But it's also the whole back half of the book is the lists of all the films and where you can see them. It's supposed to be something that might inspire readers to take off and turn to their computers and look at some of the films.
What do you hope people will get from it?
In 100 years' time?
Yeah.
What I like best about being a documentary photographer is that people choose to like the work for all kinds of different reasons. So there are some people who want to go to the Bodleian and look at my work, and they might write their academic essay about digital storytelling or about the Free Photographic Omnibus or community photography or something. But what excites me more is that somebody will go there because they're interested in how a steeplejack laddered a chimney, and they'll see all my notes and pictures and all my negatives, and they'll go, oh, that's how they did it. Oh, right, that's how he did that thing. And we've got a good set of documentary pictures here recording that. So, I think documentary archives can be used in all sorts of ways. I hope they will be. When somebody wants to know why farmers were no longer allowed to kill pigs in their own yards, they had to send them off to abattoirs, they'll look at my pig killing story, which was done in a farmer's yard, and they might get upset because they see 4 blokes with a knife killing a pig, and that upset some people in the modern world. But for many hundreds of years, that was a tradition around the whole globe.
Reality,
the reality of a pig was a cheap thing to keep. It got fat quickly. You could eat all of it except for its squeal.
What's next for you?
As I say, I'm not really producing anymore, so I feel a bit of a charlatan talking to you, really, because we're talking about all things that happened in the past. I continue to respond when people want me to do things. That's one of the reasons I've done so many CRB books, is because Craig likes them and wants to do them, and people do seem to keep wanting to exhibit my work, which is very, very nice for me. So at the moment, I've got the Suburbia show is in Darmstadt in Germany, the June Street photographs with Martin Parra at the Whitworth Museum in Manchester. And then I've even got a small contribution to Craig's
your exhibition,
CRB exhibition, which is opening tomorrow night in Bristol.
Are you going down to that?
I will be going across to it, because Bristol is under an hour. And so I do turn out for special things if I can, So assuming I'm feeling all right, I'll be there tomorrow night,
Are you still in the camper van?
We have a camper van, It's getting a bit long in the tooth. It's been a fantastic lockdown visiting vehicle, social distancing vehicle. We've been able to visit people without going into their houses,
People you know, of course.
Yeah, family mostly. Yeah. No, we haven't visited too many strangers. But my wife and I, we've got 3 sons, and we've got grandchildren, and family is very important to us, and
of course.
Trying to keep. They don't all live in the neighbourhood, and so trying to keep in touch with everybody. But being able to just sling the van onto someone's front forecourt, it's just, as long as they've got enough room to park it, then you can be independent of the household, but you can all meet up in the garden or in a park or whatever. And so we were able to keep going through a lot of the pandemic time. The van was very important to us.
I saw the film on Neville Davis when you visited him, and you drove your camper van right up to his front door and his driveway.
Yes.
I thought that was hilarious.
Well, that's
this is dark shadow appearing in front of his head. Brilliant.
It's nice.
Brilliant, Daniel. Listen, I mean, it's been lovely listening to you and learning from you. And I've said it a few times in here. You have taught me quite a few things, and you may not realise that. But
you're very kind, Zach. Thank you for listening to me, rambling on.
Daniel, it's been a pleasure. In the future, if there's anything else you want to talk about, there's a project, just give us a shout and we'll do something again. Hopefully I'll talk to you soon.
That would be lovely. Thank you, Zach.
Pleasure, Daniel. All the best.